Hello, everybody. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on Saturday, March 7th, 2026. And your reader is Joe Gibbs. I hope everyone's having a nice Saturday so far. Take a look and see what is happening in the New York Times. It says here, what might we suggest? 4 weekend recommendations from around the newsroom. Adding to your playlist, that's number 1. Harry Styles recently announced a 30-show residency at Madison Square Garden in New York City, beginning in August. In the hopes of bonding over their shared love of his music, fans are planning to sublet their spare rooms to other concertgoers. Can't make it to a show? You're in luck. His new album, Kiss All the Time, Disco Occasionally, is out now. NewYorkTimes.com real estate. Number 2, experimenting with fashion. Snowfers, a hybrid of sneakers and loafers. Snowfers were a sartorial trend a few years ago that failed to take off. The shoes were as indelible as they were odd, Jacob Gallagher wrote. Many people found them straight up ugly. Snowfers may have been a fail, but perhaps the footwear will inspire you to dabble in the unfamiliar. Go to NewYorkTimes.com-styles. I don't want a snowfer. Let's say number 3, going for a long walk in your snowfers. Make no bones about it. Pets can offer more than just companionship. Research dating back to decades has found that people who have pets tend to be healthier than people who don't. Dana G. Smith reported for the Well section. Studies show that having a pet is associated with lower blood pressure and lower rates of death after a heart attack or stroke. Consider this weekend your opportunity to return the love to your furry friend. NewYorkTimes.com-well. And number 4, embracing old technology. Apple's iPod, the portable media player introduced nearly 25 years ago and discontinued in 2022, is finding new fans among young people who may not have ever been born when it was first released. For the business desk, the reporter Kaylee Huang spoke to young people about gadgets' unique appeal. We have so many devices that do everything, one Gen Zer said. A lot of time that gets overwhelming. It's possible their stories will inspire you to rummage through your closet for the devices you once held close. For more, tune in at NewYorkTimes.com/business. Let's take a look at some facts of interest. Data centers currently use around 5% of U.S. electricity, and that could grow to as much as 17% by 2030 as interest in AI grows, according to the Electric Power Research Institute. Number 2, the 136, a long-range version of Iran's Shahed drones, triangle-shaped loitering mutants, roughly 11 feet long, can travel about 1,200 miles, which makes it capable of reaching targets across the Middle East. That's pretty far for a drone. Alyssa Liu, the next fact. Alyssa Liu, the 20-year-old figure skater who won gold at the 2026 Olympic Games, has studied many forms of dance over the years, including flamenco, tutting, ballroom, contemporary, modern contemporary, ballet, and hip-hop. I'm sure that all helps her with the skating. Next fact, much of Venezuela's vast deposits of gold, tungsten, and other minerals are untapped and found in southern rainforest regions that include protected lands. I'm sure they'd love to get their hands on some of that protected gold. Another fact, Jubilee, a showgirl revenue in Las Vegas that closed in 2016, was the inspiration for the director Gia Coppola's film The Last Showgirl, about a performer, Pamela Anderson, and a fading Vegas review. Yeah, I'm sure that went right to DVD. And the very last one, the healthcare industry and related professions and social assistance category added 693,000 positions last year. Without it, the U.S. economy would have lost 570,000 jobs. That's nuts. All right, here. What else do we have? Here's a little illustration, little black and white cartoon with the sun and some toys and a person climbing. It says the U.S. birth rate is plummeting, down by more than 25% since 2007. While the stat is alarming, some say it's a good thing. Teenagers and young women in their 20s, key contributors to the decline, are seeking more control over their lives. Other possible explanations for the downturn include the spread of reliable contraception and smartphones as a substitute for socialization. An overwhelming majority of American women still want children, according to national surveys. But at what age will they feel ready? Smartphones are taking the place of babies. Here to help. 5 books to help you through a breakup. Then there's a little illustration. It looks like a guy's leaving with a box in his hand, and she's about to close the door and hit him. Heartbreak has its name for a reason. When we experience rejection or the loss of a partner, we feel it in our bodies. Books, however, can help soothe us. We ask psychologists, therapists, and dating coaches to share the books they recommend most during a breakup. Here's your first book, Break Up on Purpose by John Kim. In 2024 book, the author, who also goes by the Angry Therapist, reframes heartbreak as a chance to understand your patterns and to grow, rather than seeing it as a failure. He highlights 8 types of breakups, such as the breakup that never ends, along with the personal stories to help readers make sense of their situations, and that is Break Up on Purpose by John Kim. There's another book, Conscious Uncoupling by Catherine Woodward Thomas. Mrs. Woodward Thomas, a marriage therapist, wrote, Conscious uncoupling, a term popularized by Gwyneth Paltrow, to help couples end relationships with intention and grace. Published in 2015, the book features antidotes, guided exercises, scripts, and a 5-step healing process. There's scripts for the breaking up now. And your other book, Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. In her book, Dr. Neff, an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin, explains the science behind the self-compassion, illustrating why it's healthier than blaming oneself. That's Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. How to Be Single and Happy by Jenny Tates. This book is deeply researched exploration of what it means to build a meaningful life while single. Dr. Tates, a clinical psychologist, shares her journey from a broken engagement to meeting her partner. And that's How to Be Single and Happy by Jenny Tates. The very last book, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For by Richard Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz is a family therapist who developed internal family systems, a therapeutic approach that suggests we are made of different parts of personas, each with their own gifts and challenges. In his book, he applies the approach to romantic relationships that are undergoing turmoil. That is, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For by Richard Schwartz. Thank you, Richard. May the Schwartz be with you, Richard. Thank you. All right. What else we got here? What do we have in the New York Times on this lovely Saturday? Here's a headline from history. Mrs. Roosevelt takes pistol on motor trips and can use it, she says, in New Orleans. March 7th of 1937. I remember that day. Although she said she hates guns, Eleanor Roosevelt, then the First Lady, admitted to carrying a pistol when she motored alone. The Times reported Mrs. Roosevelt was in New Orleans delivering a lecture on a day in the White House before an audience of about 7,000 people, mostly women. She liked driving solo, and the Secret Service insisted that she carry a gun when unaccompanied. Between 1933 and 1937, she reportedly averaged 40,000 miles a year. When asked if she could use the pistol, Mrs. Roosevelt said she received some training at the New York National Guard. Certainly I can use it. In 2014, the former First Lady Smith & Wesson gun, a 49th birthday present from her personal bodyguard, was sold at auction to a private collector for $50,600 or about $69,315 today. Very nice. Interesting story. Quote of the day. To catch an American at the frontier, I was served to them on a platter. James Lucky Lange, an American who was detained by Venezuela on December 8th while capping a guest to visit every country in the continental Americas. He was held for more than a month and said he was beaten and starved. He was freed after the United States captured Venezuela's leader, Nicolás Maduro. And his quote again was, to catch an American at the frontier, I was served to them on a platter. Here's a little reminder. Daylight savings time resumes at 2 a.m. on Sunday. Clocks are set ahead 1 hour. That's nice. Everything will start staying lighter a little longer. What do we got here now? Well, if you're interested in buying a vehicle, anyone wants to know, they are now like the price of a mortgage. Potential buyers quail at rise in average price to $50,000 for new car. This has a little spot that says monthly vehicle payments of nearly $800 are likened to a second mortgage. While that is down a little from early in 2025, it is still much higher than in 2021 when the rate averaged 48%. In addition, the average price of new cars has reached nearly $50,000, up from $38,400 in 2019, according to Cox Automotive, a research firm. Persuading people to buy a new vehicle is not the only challenge the auto industry is facing. President Trump's tariffs on new cars and car parts have raised costs and forced manufacturers to rejigger their supply chains. While many automakers are investing less in electric vehicles, they're still putting money into their technologies like gasoline-electric hybrids and self-driving systems. The auto industry outlook has been clouded by the U.S. and Israel war with Iran, which has sent oil and gasoline prices up. The conflict could lead to higher inflation and uncertainty, which could hurt car sales over time. Sure, people are going to keep the one they have. Ford Motor said on Wednesday that its sales in February fell 5.5% from a year earlier, but Toyota, Hyundai, and Honda reported higher sales for the month. One reason auto sales have not weakened significantly is that affluent consumers are still buying cars at brisk pace, but many in the industry fear that the affordability problem could become a bigger headache for sure. We believe as you get into May, June, July, and August, you're going to start feeling it as new car prices have nowhere to go but up. Jeff Dyke, president of Sonic Automotive, which owns 100 car franchises across the country, said in a conference call last month. Automakers have taken some steps to try to put a lid on prices. In the past year, they have cut costs and moved some production to U.S. factories to mitigate the effects of tariffs. Companies have also generally avoided passing on the entire increased costs from tariffs to dealers and car buyers. But making those changes has cut into the company profits, Mr. Dyke noted. General Motors, recently said tariffs added $3.1 billion to its costs last year. Ford said they added about $2 billion. The tariffs are too high, Mr. Dyke said, adding that they expected the car makers to eventually pass on more of the cost of tariffs to dealers and car buyers. One way manufacturers may already be doing this is by increasing destination charges, which are supposed to account for the cost of delivering cars from the factories to dealerships. Ford, for example, now adds $25.95, $2,595 in shipping fees on the F-150 and other large trucks. In 2023, the fee was $17.95. Automakers and their finance arms are also offering longer loans as a way to reduce monthly payments, though that tactic can significantly increase the total amount paid over the term of the loan. More than 20% of auto loans made in 2025 were for 84 months, 7 years or longer. Your car's just about out of it by then, right? According to Edmunds, an auto research firm. Even so, monthly new car payments have been rising. The average monthly payment in the final 3 months of 2025 was $774 and up from $636 at the end of 2021, according to Edmunds. For a lot of people, that's out of reach, said Jessica Caldwell, a vice president of insights at Edmunds. It's almost like having a second mortgage. Car prices started rising rapidly during the COVID-19 pandemic when a shortage of computer chips limited production. I remember that. With factories shipping vehicles in fits and starts, demand quickly outstrip supply. That enabled automakers to offer fewer and less generous discounts. Other factors have kept prices high. Since the end of the pandemic, automakers have restricted production, leaving fewer cars on dealer lots waiting to be sold. GM had 486,000 vehicles in U.S. dealer inventories at the end of 2025. Years ago, it typically had twice that many in stock. At the time, many automakers have stopped making affordable sedans that appeal to the people who are buying their first new cars. GM, Ford, and Stellantis have eliminated many entry-level and inexpensive base models. The cheapest 2026 model year car, Hyundai Venue, which starts at $22,150, including its destination fee, according to Cars.com. New electronic systems, touchscreens, and driver assistance systems have also made cars more expensive. Many new models come with parking sensors, forward-looking radar and cameras, and blind spot monitoring. While those devices make driving safer, they also raise the cost of repairing cars. A front-end fender bender can now cost several $1,000s if sensors and other computerized components need to be replaced. Higher repair costs, in turn, have pushed up insurance rates. Doug Freeman, an insurance executive in Amesbury, Mass., said higher car prices had pushed him to think differently about buying new vehicles. He usually purchases his vehicles, but last year he leased a Kia Sportage for his wife in order to secure a reasonable monthly payment and avoid a healthy down payment. Recently, he was shopping for a car for his son and found he would probably have to spend more than $30,000, so he bought a used Subaru Impreza for about $18,000. I didn't want a third car payment, he said. Buying a new just wasn't in the budget. So yes, this is absolutely crazy. It's very, everything is getting out of whack. Okay. What do we have here? Here's a story about two musicals secured 11 nominations each for Britain's equivalent of the Tony Awards. Paddington and Into the Woods leads the Oliver Pack. Paddington, the musical and revival of Into the Woods, have received the most nominations for this year's Oliver Awards, Britain's equivalent of the Tonys. Each secured 11 nods. That acclaim on Thursday follows rave reviews from British theater critic Sarah Hemming, reviewing Paddington for the Financial Times, and the show brought the marmalade-eating bear gorgeously to life. And Helman Burkett, writing in the New York Times, called Into the Woods a story based on fairy tale characters, a visual treat. Its pleasures are simple and large part nostalgic, he added. The 11 nominations for Paddington at the Savoy Theatre in London through May 2027, including for the Best New Musical, it's up against the unlikely pilgrimage of Harold Fry, about a man who walks 500 miles to visit a sick friend running at the theater, Royal Haymarket, through April 18th. Shucked, which ran at Regent's Park Open Air Theater and a staging of Sondheim's final show, here we are at the National Theater. Other nods for Paddington include Best Director for Luke Shepard and a joint Best Actor in a Musical nomination for James Hamid and Artie Shaw, who together innovatively bring Paddington to life on stage. The nominations for Into the Woods, directed by Jordan Fine and running at the Bridge Theater through May 30th, include Best Musical Revival. In that category, it is competing against American Psycho, now at the Almeida Theater, The Producers at the Garrick Theater through September 19th, and a much-hyped staging of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice Evita, starring Rachel Ziegler, that ran last year at the London Palladium. Ziegler, who during the show sang Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, from an external balcony to packed crowds at the street below, is among the nominees for the Best Actress in a Musical. The most nominated plays this year are critically acclaimed revival of Arthur Miller's All My Sons, directed by Ivo van Hove, that ran at Wyndham's Theatre, the London transfer of Stereophonic, which ran at the Duke of York's Theatre, and Kenrex, a new play that ran at the other place, and that the critic Matt Wolf in New York Times called a dazzling deep dive into a true crime saga that rocked small-time Missouri in 1981. And above, there is a picture of Paddington Bear with his suitcase and his coat and hat on in an old-fashioned looking room. And then there's two people from Into the Woods. And yes, there's two people standing, you guessed it, in the woods. Let's see. All three of those productions secured 6 nominations of the plays we mentioned. Kenrex is among the 4 nominees for the coveted award for the Best New Play. It is competing for that title against 1536, a play set against the backdrop of Anne Boleyn's Execution, which ran at the Almeida Theater and is transferring to the West End in May. Inter Alia, starring Rosamund Pike, about a judge whose son is accused of rape, which ran at the National Theater last year and opens at Wyndham's Theater on March 19th, and Punch by James Graham, a play about an accidental death that ran last year on both the West End and Broadway. As usual, a host of celebrities are among the nominees for the Best Acting, including Cate Blanchett, nominated for the Best Actress in her role in The Seagull at the Barbican Theater, Tom Hiddleston, nominated for Best Actor for Much Ado About Nothing at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, and Bryan Cranston, Papa Asaidu, and Marianne Jean-Baptiste, all nominated for All My Sons. The winners are to be announced on April 12th in a ceremony at the Royal Albert Hall in London. Nick Mohammed, best known for his role in Ted Lasso, is this year's host. All right. Here's something I know nobody wants to think about, but this goes over. The title says, Our hospice system subverts the very point of hospice care. Families have to bear far too many responsibilities when caring for loved ones, that's for sure. When my siblings, and this is from Sandeep Jahar, a cardiologist in New York who writes frequently about medical care and public health. When my siblings and I decided to put our father in hospice care at his home in the spring of 2021, his Alzheimer's was near end stage. He could barely get out of bed or dress or feed himself. Hospice care seemed to be the best way for him to end his life with dignity. Nearly all Medicare hospice patients receive care in their residence, so as a standard, we enlisted the services of Medicare-approved hospice agency. We soon encountered a harsh reality, however. Dying at home isn't easy, even with hospice care. The hospice system, we learned, requires family involvement in the dying process to a degree that even we, as a family of doctors, weren't comfortable with. We were responsible for bathing my father and helping him use the toilet, changing his clothes, and most daunting, administering morphine and other sedatives to treat his pain and anxiety. A nurse was scheduled to come to the house only for about an hour twice a week, getting an aide to help with basic activities of daily living was nearly impossible. The main problem was funding. In 2024, the average per patient Medicare patient to hospice agencies was about 200 a day, with an annual cap of 33,500. That outlay would barely pay for part-time aid, yet it also needed to cover medications, medical equipment, and nurse visits. So hospice agencies are forced to shift the bulk of responsibilities to families as the dying process unfolds over weeks or months. I remember a Friday evening when we decided that my father, who had stopped swallowing, was severely dehydrated and needed intravenous fluid. The hospice agency wasn't equipped to provide that service, even as a comfort measure, so my brother drove to a hospital to get an IV kit and a few bags of saline, and then came back to the house and inserted the IV catheter himself, as my father kicked and hollered. When my brother was done, he tied the bag of fluid to the ceiling fan with some sewing thread because we didn't have any IV pole. Ironically, we could have put my father in an acute care hospital bed costing $3,000 a day without any pushback from Medicare. The Medicare hospice benefit is supposed to provide a cost-effective alternative at home to expensive end-of-life care in hospitals. But by providing so little funding, Medicare too often makes hospice care an unviable option. Our family was fortunate that we had the resource to provide the care for my father needed. My siblings and I divided up responsibilities, and one of us stayed with him at all times. But many families are unable to manage and forced to move their loved one to a hospital or a nursing home, or in rare cases that the Medicare allows for, an inpatient hospice facility. Patients themselves may choose to die in an institutional setting for fear of being a burden on their families or not receiving adequate symptom relief. Sadly, the practice of relying so heavily on families subverts the very purpose for which hospice care was created. When Cicely Sanders, a nurse and doctor, opened the first modern hospice program in London in 1967, she laid out three guiding principles for easing the process of dying: relief of physical pain, preservation of dignity, and respect for the psychological and spiritual aspects of death. My family's experience at the hospice system, all these principles were compromised. The care responsibilities we had to shoulder were more than we were emotionally prepared to take on in those grieving final days. And my father's dignity and comfort would have been better served with more guidance from nurse specialists on how to administer his pain medications and sedatives. Tight hospice budgets can compromise care in even more serious ways. Not long ago, a patient of mine with end-stage heart disease was being moved from the hospital to hospice care at home. I appealed to a hospice director to approve a standard medication for him that helped control his shortness of breath and nausea. My patient had been on the drug at the hospital, and staying on it at home was essential to his comfort. Yet my application was denied. The hospice director said that the medication was too expensive, even if, as expected, my patient had less than a month to live. I could have tried to get my patient admitted to an inpatient hospice facility where he could have gotten the drug he needed more easily, but he wanted to die at home. So reluctantly, I had to send him home without it. Compounding all these issues is the fact that dying in America is increasingly corporatized. Today, about 3/4 of hospice agencies are for profit, and many are owned by private equity companies. It is hardly a stretch to imagine that many of these companies skimp on care to protect their bottom line. The key to better hospice experience would be a more in-home support. A minimum number of hours of aid visits per week, for example. This would require increasing Medicare hospice budgets. Of course, in the current political climate, that may be hard to sell, though, and at the end, it would almost certainly save money by avoiding costly hospitalizations. Fortunately, our family was able to keep our father at home till the end, so was his wish. Yet when I reflect on our experience, I am reminded of what an older woman with my terminal heart disease once told me. My husband said that the hardest thing to do is to die. I always thought it would be easy. Well, it seems like no matter what you're doing, it's expensive. All the way to the end, buying a car, buying groceries, and simply trying to relax and pass away is very expensive, and it's not good. All right, let's take a look here. Something else. Some sports. Quarterback Kyler Murray was at his best improvising, but his decision making, especially under pressure, could be atrocious. Kyler Murray, if you don't know, was the quarterback of the Cardinals. And up here it says, there is a picture. There's like a few different players, one of them being Kyler Murray. And it says, Murray never met hype, but Cardinals should shoulder some blame. So there's an article here because they did let him go. And let's see what they say about this. Kyler Murray faced several obstacles during his time with the Arizona Cardinals, but the biggest surfaced on 2019 spring day when he was drafted. Quarterbacks taken with the number 1 pick in the NFL draft are expected to develop into the position's top tier. Murray never got there. But before Arizona fans celebrate his release, which will officially happen next week, ending his run in the desert after 7 seasons, it is important to understand how we got here. This is not a great time for the organization. The Cardinals are on the hook for Murray's $36.8 million salary for 2026, another failure in the history of many. But this is the problem now. They're giving these quarterbacks and all these players such huge money, and if they want to let them go, they're stuck with it. No doubt Murray bears responsibility. Although he never would become the difference maker the Cardinals envisioned, he was at times effective and electrifying. He could be the best player on the field. He can make plays few at his position could. The best plays in football are those the crowd can see developing. When Larry Fitzgerald was his prime, the roar of fans sometimes would start before the Cardinals receiver actually caught the ball, just because they could see Fitzgerald had room to run and they knew they were about to see something special. The same happened with Murray. Every so often a play would break down and Murray would escape, running into space. Holding the football loosely in his right hand, a linebacker would approach, and this is when it became clear the linebacker had no chance. Murray was at his best improvising, which is what made him a headache for opponents. But it was not enough. Inconsistency was a problem. His size, Murray listed at 5'10", did not help. His decision-making, especially under pressure, could be atrocious. The only time Murray led the Cardinals to the playoffs, he might have played his worst game. In a 2021 NFC wildcard against the Los Angeles Rams, Murray lined up in his own end zone. The Cardinals were being outplayed but trailed only by 14-0. After the snap, Murray could not find an open receiver. About to be sacked, he flipped a pass in the direction of receiver Rondale Moore that had no chance. It was a pick six, game over. Murray was judged on that play for the rest of the Arizona career. He never lived it down. He never returned to the playoffs. In the summer of 2022, Murray signed a 5-year extension. So let's get this straight. In 2021, he gets to the playoffs for the first time, basically hands the Rams the football game. So let's think, what could we do for 2022 with Murray? I have an idea. Why don't we give him a 5-year extension worth $230.5 million? Yeah, that's a great idea. That made him one of the game's richer quarterbacks, in which he actually accomplished up to then one playoff appearance, and he didn't show up at all. The best completion he had was actually to the Rams, in which they scored a touchdown. So I guess he could say he threw a touchdown pass that day. So I'd have to say it was a brilliant idea to give him $230.5 million instead of saying, if you get us to the playoffs again and you actually get us to the NFC Championship game, the bonuses are going to make you one of the richest players there is. But no one does that. You have to make it where the bonus is the incentive and the salary is just a base. You know, like a sales rep. You have a base and commission, sometimes only commission, and that forces you to perform, right? No, let's give him $230.5 million for nothing. Normally, a deal such as this shows commitment and trust, yet the Cardinals included an independent study addendum that suggested otherwise. It required him to watch 4 hours of game film a week outside of normal team preparation. Once that made public, the clause brought ridicule to the organization. The Cardinals removed it, and the stain lasted. Well, I mean, you know, for $230 million, you can't even tell them to watch game film. The contract enhanced Murray's role as the face of the franchise, something he had not always embraced. He was better with local papers. He showed more personality, but his performance on the field never matched the numbers on his paycheck. Injuries contributed 5 months after signing the deal. Late in 22 season, Murray tore his anterior cruciate ligament against the New England Patriots. He missed the first 9 games of the next season, the first under Jonathan Gannon as coach. This says he was seldom surrounded with talent to help him succeed. The rest of that year was spent learning a new offense. In 2024, Murray looked recovered and comfortable. During a midseason 4-game win streak that put Arizona atop the NFC West, he actually was included in conversations for Most Valuable Player award. But the Cardinals fizzled over the second half, and 2025 was a disaster. Behind the shaky offensive line, Murray lasted 5 games. A foot injury that was never fully explained ended his season. He spent his final games in Arizona watching them from the sideline in street clothes. He did not say anything publicly until news of his release leaked this week. The quarterbacks issued a statement on social media thanking those who supported him and his family. He expressed confidence in his ability, suggesting his best ball is yet to come. He also apologized, and this is important, for not ending the 77-year drought for his organization. Murray referencing the organization's history of not winning a championship since 1947. Was a deliberate parting shot, and this is where his decision goes beyond the quarterback who never lived up to the hype. The Cardinals selected Murray. They paid him, but they seldom surrounded him with talent that would have helped him succeed. Over 7 seasons, Murray played with 1,000-yard wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Michael Wilson last season finished with 1,006 receiving yards, but most of that production came with Murray injured. In addition, Murray had a 1,000-yard rusher, James Conner, who reached the figure in 23 and 24. Tight end Trey McBride has developed into a star, but Arizona's offensive line regressed. The defense underperformed. This is not to make excuse for Murray. His 38-48-1 record with no playoff wins as a starter speaks for itself, but Arizona's issues go beyond the quarterback. The Cardinals last season played 12 games without Murray. They're 1-11 in those contests. For both parties, it was time to move on. Their marriage had gone stale, but one has much more to prove than the other, and it's not the quarterback. Yeah, well, you give a player $230 million, and then you get no other players for the team, and you wonder why you go 1-11 in a stretch. What else do we have here in this lovely Saturday, March 7th, 2026, from the New York Times? All right, here's some business. What do we have in business? Battery maker lays off nearly 1,000 workers. Well, that is crazy. SK Battery America, Inc. laid off nearly 1,000 workers at a manufacturing plant northeast of Atlanta on Friday amid automakers changing electrification plans and uncertain consumer demand for EVs. Yeah, just like that, that's dying. That's because who wants to spend 10 or 15,000 to replace the battery when you buy an electric vehicle? You might as well buy a new car. The company said Friday marked the last working day for 958 plant employees, about 37% of its workforce. Affected workers will be paid through May 6th. The plant will continue to employ about 1,600 workers. SK opened the $2.6 billion battery plant in Commerce, Georgia, in January of 2022. The Korean company notably supplied the Ford F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck. Ford announced plans to cancel the fully electric version of the truck in December. The news comes as the U.S. electric vehicle market is at a standstill among the Trump administration, steering federal support away from its favor of more lax automotive emissions policies and broader agenda supporting the oil and gas industries. SK America's spokesperson Joe Guy Collier said in a statement that the workers' reduction was made to align operations to market conditions. SK Battery America remains committed to Georgia and to build a robust U.S. supply chain for advanced battery manufacturing, Mr. Collier said. We are pursuing a range of future customers, including the battery electric storage system arena. The City of Commerce and the Jackson County Commission chair did not immediately respond to requests for comment on Friday. Just like that. The battery cars, electric, I know a lot of people are still buying them. But, it's the thing to do. Are we going to get rid of fuel cars? And now Ford's already, and they're probably not the only one, canceling a complete line of trucks from their inventory. And who else is going to follow and go right to keeping it with fuel? Now fuel is going up. But this isn't a surprise. Another story. Ex-executive is charged with covering up deaths. This story is crazy. So here we go. Federal prosecutors charged a former executive of Exthera Medical, a California medical device manufacturer, with concealing from the government the deaths of 2 cancer patients who were treated with the company's blood filter. So they treat these people with their blood filter, and 2 people die. And they were concealing that from the government. Dr. Sanja Eilick of Exthera's former chief regulatory officer agreed to plead guilty and faces up to 3 years in prison, the Justice Department said. Prosecutors also entered into a deferred prosecution agreement with Exthera in which the company admitted that it defrauded and misled the Food and Drug Administration by failing to report the debts. The company agreed to pay a criminal penalty of $750,000, which will be earmarked for families of victims, and to forfeit $5.7 million. The 2 patients, David Hudlow of Panama City, Florida, and Kyle Chupp of Orlilla, Ontario, died one day apart in April of 2024. shortly after returning home from having their blood filtered on the Caribbean island of Antigua. Mr. Hudlow, 55, and Mr. Chubb, 39, were among 24 patients with late-stage cancer diagnosis from Xthera, lured to an Antigua with promises that its blood filter, which the FDA had conditionally approved only for the treatment of COVID-19, could cure them. The New York Times reported last year patients were charged $45,000 per treatment session. The Antigua operation was the brainchild of Alan Quisha, an American billionaire who saw promise in Xthera's blood filter as a cancer and longevity treatment. You know what you want to do if you're going to spend $45,000 on an IFCOM? I think if I had some cancer that was pretty much uncurable and I'm going to go to Antigua, I think I would just go on a 2-week vacation and just try to enjoy myself. And you could probably do that for about $10,000 and not $45,000. Like these poor people did, right? What else do we have here in the New York Times? What do we have here in the New York Times that we would like to hear about? Oh, there is some more business. I don't know if it's good or bad. Stocks and bonds. Market drops with a weaker job report as oil surges. Oil shot to its highest price since 2023 after surging again Friday because of the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. And a weak update on the U.S. job market knocked stocks over to cap Wall Street's worst week since October. I could tell you that the average price of gas in the area I'm in, around Tonawanda, was like $3.09. That's like was the average. I went out today and it was $3.49. So it's definitely rising. The S&P 500 dropped 1.3% after a report showed U.S. employers can cut more jobs last month than they created, and after oil prices spiked above $90 per barrel. The combination of a weak economy and high inflation is a worst-case scenario for investors because the Federal Reserve has no good tool to fix both problems at the same time. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged as many as 945 points before finishing with a loss of 453, or 0.9%, and the NASDAQ Composite sank 1.6%. It says stagflation is what economists call the miserable mix of stagnating economy with high inflation, and a separate report released Friday added to the soreness after showing the U.S. retailers made less money in January than economists expected. It raised the disconcerting possibility that spending by U.S. households, the main engine of economy, may be stretched near its maximum. Well, it's kind of hard to have people spending on anything else besides groceries, fuel, and your necessities, right? Usually when the economy is unsteady and the job market is weakening, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates to give things a boost. Lower rates can make it easier for households to get mortgages and for companies to raise money to expand, while also lifting prices for stocks and other investments. The Fed cut its main interest rate several times last year and had indicated more would come this year. But lower interest rates can also make inflation worse, and the Fed's hands may be increasingly tied because spiking oil prices are pushing inflation higher due to disruptions for the energy industry. The price for a barrel of Brent crude, the international standard, leaped another 8.5% to settle at 92.69. It briefly rose above 94 to touch its highest level since September of 23, that is. A barrel of benchmark U.S. crude breached the $90 level for the first time since 23 and jumped 12.2% to $90.90. If oil prices spike further, like $100 per barrel, and stay there, some analysts and investors say it could go too much for the global economy to withstand. To be sure, the U.S. stock market has a history of bouncing back relatively quickly following conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere, as long as oil prices don't jump too high for too long. Uncertainty about just how high oil prices will go this time around and for how long caused frenetic swings across financial markets this past week, sometimes hour by hour. On Monday, the S&P 500 tumbled to an immediate 1.2% loss at the start of trading, but made it all the way back and ended the day with a tiny gain. Mr. Trump's most recent signal on the war was that he wants an unconditional surrender of Iran, apparently ruling out negotiations. In the bond market, Treasury yields wavered with higher oil prices pushing upward on them and discouraging updates on the U.S. economy pulling downward. The yield on the 10-year Treasury initially rose toward 4.19% before pulling back to 4.15%. That's up from 4.13% late Thursday and just 3.97% a week earlier. Smaller companies often feel the bite of high borrowing costs more because many need to borrow to grow. The Russell 2000 index of small stocks fell a market-leading 2.3%. Among the big companies in the S&P 500, those with high fuel bills helped lead the way lower. Old Dominion Freight Line sank 7.9%, Cruise Line Carnival fell 5%, and Southwest Airlines lost 5.3%. In stock markets abroad, indexes slumped in Europe following a better finish. In Asia, London's FTSE 100 fell 1.2%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng jumped 1.7%. And there is some business from New York Times. Let's see what else we have here. Why don't we eat something? Who's hungry? Huh? Anybody hungry? I ate before I came down here, so I'm not really hungry. But I'm going to go up and probably get like something for dessert because I have a sweet tooth. And hopefully no one tells my doctor that I'm eating sweets. So, what do we want to make here? How about some quick pasta fagioli? You know pasta? Well, let's see what we need here. So, canned tomatoes, canned beans, dried pasta. That gets you most of the way to Ali Slago's weeknight take on a classic Italian soup. A little bacon or pancetta, garlic, chicken broth get you across the finish line. Don't skip the splash of red wine, vinegar at the end, which lifts those hearty flavors. All right, so the cooking time, Ali Slago's cooking time is 20 minutes, and it serves 4 to 6 people or just me. What do we need here? 3 slices of bacon chopped or 4 ounces diced pancetta. 4 garlic cloves, thinly sliced. 4 cups of chicken broth. 1 28-ounce can whole peeled tomatoes. 8 ounces of short pasta such as elbows or tiani. 1/4 teaspoon Italian seasoning or dried oregano. Salt and black pepper. 2 15-ounce cans cannellini or pinto beans, 1 tablespoon red wine vinegar, grated Parmesan, and chopped parsley, optional for serving. You can't have pasta fagioli without having some Parmesan. You don't have sneakers without laces, do you, people? You need Parmesan on your Italian dish. So what are we going to do with all this stuff that we talked about? Number 1, in a large Dutch oven or pot, heat the bacon and garlic over medium-high. Stir occasionally until golden and crisp, 3 to 6 minutes. Reduce the heat if the bottom of the pan is getting too dark. That's number 1. Number 2, we're going to add the broth, tomatoes, pasta, Italian seasoning, and a pinch each of salt and pepper. Bring to a boil over high. Number 3, meanwhile, drain and rinse the beans and add those in too. Reduce to a lively simmer over medium-high and cook until the pasta is al dente. That's 7 to 9 minutes. Stir often, scraping the bottom of the pot to keep the pasta from sticking and making some of the tomatoes and beans against the side of the pot, or mashing them. Number 4, off the heat, stir in the vinegar, season to taste with salt and pepper. Divide among bowls, then top with Parmesan and chopped parsley. If using, we're using it, people. Okay, there is no if we're using it or not. That's not happening. All right. I have a couple minutes left here. Lemon bars. And there's a beautiful picture of these lemon bars. Now I'm definitely going upstairs, and I'm definitely getting a snack. We've reached peak citrus season, so let's mark it with Genevieve Co.'s Buttery Puckery Cookies, which can be made entirely with regular lemons or a mix of lemon and blood orange juices to tint them pale pink. What do we need? Non-stick cooking spray, 10 tablespoons, 140 grams of unsalted butter melted and cooled, 1/4 cup of 50 grams granulated sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, a teaspoon of fine salt, sea salt, 2 to 4 lemons, half cups, 200 grams of all-purpose flour. For the lemon layer, now that was for the crust, okay? That was for the crust. The lemon layer, 1 1/4 cups of 250 grams of granulated sugar, 1/4 cup of 33 grams of all-purpose flour, 4 large eggs, room temp, and 2/3 cups of fresh lemon juice from the lemons above, powdered sugar for dusting optional. Number 1, prepare the crust. Heat the oven to 350 degrees and line the bottom and sides of 9-inch square metal pan with foil. Lightly coat with non-stick cooking spray. Get it done. Number 2, combine the butter, sugar, vanilla, and salt in a large bowl. Finally grate in the zest of 2 lemons, reserving the zested lemons for the lemon layer, and then mix until well combined. While stirring, gradually add the flour and the stir just until the dough comes together into a mass. Scrape into the prepared pan and gently press the dough into an even layer. Okay? Number 3 is bake until the center is dry and the edges are golden, 15 to 18 minutes. Number 4, while the crust bakes, make the lemon layer. Squeeze 2/3 cup juice from the zested lemons and more fruit if needed. In the same bowl used for the crust, whisk the sugar and flour, whisk in the eggs until smooth, and then whisk in the lemon juice until incorporated. There's a lot of whisking going on there. When the crust comes out of the oven, this is number 5, whisk again the lemon mixture again and then gently pour it over the hot crust. Turn the oven down to 300 degrees. Number 6, bake until the lemon layer is set around the edges and jiggles in a tiny bit in the center, about 20 minutes. Number 7, your final one, cool completely in the pan, then refrigerate, uncovered until cold and fully set, at least 3 hours. Use the foil to lift the bars out of the pan to slice. Serve cold or at room temperature. The bars can be refrigerated in an airtight container for up to 5 days. If you like, dust with powdered sugar right before serving. I do like. Anytime we could dust some happiness on there, I like. So, this is the end of our time. Love reading for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. I look forward to being here next week. You have been listening to the reading of New York Times for March 7th, 2026. For more information, call 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Your reader has been Joe Gibbs. I am out. Good day.